I just found out my wife secretly sold our family home for $350, $0 behind my back, then convinced my sister to lie in court so she could claim the whole inheritance. Now she's draining my savings and I feel completely betrayed. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, especially not in the most brutal way possible. The whole thing hit me like a freight train. I was blindsided, completely blindsided. One day, everything seemed normal, and the next, I was uncovering a web of lies, betrayal, and financial manipulation that changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage. It all started with some small signs, stuff I brushed off at first, her being distant, secretive phone calls, late nights at work. But then I stumbled onto something that made my stomach drop, a series of texts and emails that didn't add up, and an unexpected visit from her sister, Lisa, which made me suspicious. Enough to dig deeper. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when I decided to check her phone, something I'd never done before, honestly. I was just curious, maybe a little paranoid, but I hadn't seen her act this strange in a long time. I found a string of messages between her and a guy named Mark. They weren't just friendly chats, they were downright flirtatious, full of promises and plans to meet up. My heart started pounding. I couldn't believe it. I'd always trusted her, or at least I thought I did. But here it was, proof that she'd been hiding something, maybe even cheating on me for months. I decided to confront her that night. I waited until she came home from whatever work dinner she had been so secretive about. When she walked in, her face was a little too calm, a little too rehearsed. I threw the phone on the table and asked her outright, "Who is Mark? What's going on?" Her eyes flickered and she tried to brush it off with her usual bitchy smirk. "Oh, just some guy from the gym. You know how guys are, they're all the same. Nothing special," she said, waving her hand dismissively, but I wasn't buying it. Her excuses sounded hollow, like she'd been rehearsing her lies. That moment was a punch in the gut. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I could see her trying to spin her story, but her whole demeanor was different. She was defensive, almost angry that I'd found out. She started throwing out more lies, claiming Mark was just a sex buddy, nothing serious, that she'd never meant to hurt me, and that I was overreacting. But I knew better. I'd seen the texts. I knew she'd been sneaking around behind my back, probably for months. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial too. I'd always trusted her with money, and now I was realizing she'd been hiding a lot, selling our house, lying about the inheritance, draining our savings. I couldn't believe how calm she was, actually. Like she thought she could just lie her way out of it. Her words kept twisting, trying to justify her actions, saying she was lonely, that I'd been distant, that it was just sex, that she didn't love Mark, just needed someone to feel alive. But I saw through it all. The more she talked, the angrier I got. I'd always been the trusting type, but that trust was shattered in an instant. I felt a mixture of rage, heartbreak, and confusion. How could she do this? How could she lie so convincingly? And worse, how long had she been doing it? I had no idea how to process it, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without a fight. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those lies slipping out of her mouth like venom. I kept replaying the moment I found out, trying to make sense of how someone I loved and trusted could do something so cruel. It wasn't just the affair. It was the betrayal of everything we'd built together. Our home, our future, our trust. I felt like I'd been hit by a bus, but I also knew I couldn't let her keep pulling the strings anymore. The next day, I started digging into her phone, her emails, her bank accounts. I needed to find out how deep this went. It didn't take long. I discovered she'd been secretly selling our house, the one we bought when we first got married, for $350, $0. I couldn't believe it. She'd done it behind my back without telling me, and convinced her sister Lisa to lie in court so she could claim the whole inheritance. That was the worst part. She'd lied to everyone, including her own family, just to drain our savings and take everything she could. I found out she'd already drained most of our joint accounts, transferred money into her own, and was planning to run further. I found receipts for jewelry she'd bought, expensive dinners, and even a new luxury car she'd purchased with the money. All of it happened behind my back, and I had no idea. When I confronted her later that day, she doubled down, insisting she deserved it because I'd been so distant, so neglectful. She told me she needed to feel alive, that she was entitled to a better life. Honestly, I felt sick hearing her say that, like she was blaming me for her own choices. But the thing that really cut deep was the way she lied so effortlessly. She told me she was just trying to make us better, that she was doing it for us, even as she was secretly screwing around and selling our home. She kept spinning stories, saying Mark was just a fling, just sex, that she didn't love him. But I knew better. I knew she'd been lying the whole time. I felt like I'd been played like a fool, and the rage inside me started boiling over. How could she betray me like this? How could she sell our home, lie in court, drain our savings, and then turn around and act like I was the one in the wrong? I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. Part of me wanted to explode, to confront her with everything I'd found out, to scream and yell and tear her apart. But I also knew I had to stay calm, to plan my next move carefully. I couldn't just react out of anger. I needed to think about the bigger picture. I started making copies of all the evidence I'd uncovered, tracking her financial transactions, and even talking to a lawyer friend of mine. The more I learned, the angrier I got, and the more I realized she'd been manipulating everyone around her, her sister, her friends, even her own family. She was a master liar, and I'd been its biggest victim. That night I sat alone in our empty house, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this to me? How could she betray our vows, our life together, for money and some fleeting thrill? I didn't sleep that night either. All I could think about was how I was going to fight back, how I was going to get justice, and how I was going to reclaim what was left of my life. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. The following days were a blur of planning and confrontation. I couldn't just sit around feeling sorry for myself. I had to act. I reached out to a lawyer, showed him everything I'd uncovered: texts, emails, bank statements, the court documents where she'd lied to cover her tracks. He told me I had a solid case for both the illegal sale of the house and the inheritance fraud. That was a small relief, but it didn't make the betrayal hurt any less. The way she lied, manipulated her own family, and drained our savings, it felt like she'd turned into a stranger overnight. I also decided I needed to see what she was doing with the money now. I hired a private investigator just to get a clearer picture of her movements. Turns out, she'd already moved most of the cash into a new account under a fake name. She bought a new apartment downtown, a luxury place with a view, paid in cash. I couldn't believe her nerve. She'd sold our house, lied in court, and now she was planning to disappear with everything. It was like watching a con artist in action, and I was the fool who trusted her. One of the most shocking moments came when I confronted her about the money. She was in her new apartment, lounging on a designer sofa, sipping wine like she didn't have a care in the world. I showed her the bank transfers, the receipts for the new place. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "You're overreacting. I deserve this. You've been so distant, so cold. I needed to feel alive, and I did what I had to do." Her tone was dismissive, almost bitchy, like she thought she was doing me a favor. That moment made my blood boil. She was so convinced she was right, so full of herself, that she couldn't even see how deeply she'd betrayed everything we had. Meanwhile, the legal process moved fast. I filed for divorce, citing financial fraud and emotional betrayal. I also turned her into the authorities for the illegal sale of the house and inheritance fraud. The court hearings were brutal. She lied, twisted the facts, claimed she was the victim, that I'd been controlling and neglectful. But I had enough evidence to prove her lies. She insisted she was doing what was best for herself, and that I was just too blind to see it. Honestly, I felt numb listening to her. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. The hardest part wasn't just the betrayal, it was realizing how much she drained from us. Our savings, our future, the house we'd worked so hard for, all gone. She convinced her sister Lisa to lie in court, claiming the inheritance was hers, even though it was supposed to be a joint estate. I found out she'd lied to her family, to her friends, even to the lawyers. Her whole life was a lie, and I was the only one who saw through it all. I'd been played for a fool, but I refused to let her win. I was determined to fight for what was right, to get back at her for all the pain she caused. In the end, I realized I had to accept that my marriage was over. The woman I loved was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. But I also learned I was stronger than I thought. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and a clear plan to get justice. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew she'd try to manipulate the situation even more, but I was done being the victim. I'd take back control, even if it meant starting completely over. That's what I'm doing now, picking up the pieces and figuring out how to rebuild my life from the wreckage she left behind. The court hearings were a nightmare. She sat there, looking as bitchy as ever, trying to twist everything to her advantage. She played the victim, crying about how lonely she'd been, how I'd ignored her, how she just needed a little excitement. But her lies couldn't hold up against the mountain of evidence I had. I handed over everything: texts, bank statements, the court documents where she'd lied to cover her tracks. The judge wasn't buying her sob story. It was clear she'd been manipulating everyone, including her own sister, just to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, I was dealing with the emotional fallout. Every day felt like a roller coaster: anger, betrayal, sadness, and a deep sense of loss. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see the cracks forming earlier. I'd always trusted her, and now I was left with nothing but a bitter taste and a mountain of debt. The house was gone, sold without my knowledge or consent, and she'd convinced her sister Lisa to lie in court so she could claim the inheritance. That was the final straw. She'd lied to her own family, and I felt like I'd been stabbed in the back all over again. I also found out she'd been draining our savings. For months, siphoning off money from joint accounts, buying herself new clothes, jewelry, even a luxury car with the cash she'd stolen. I couldn't believe how brazen she was. She told her friends she was taking control of her life, but she was just running away with everything we had. I felt so betrayed, so angry, that I couldn't even look at her anymore without feeling sick. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who was manipulative, selfish, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. I decided I needed to take action. I filed for divorce, citing her financial fraud and emotional betrayal. I also contacted the authorities about the illegal sale of our house and the inheritance scam. It was a long, exhausting process, but I knew I had to see it through. I couldn't let her get away with this. I wanted justice, even if it meant tearing everything apart. The final court date was a few weeks ago. She showed up, still trying to play the victim, but the judge saw right through her. She was ordered to pay back the money she stole, and her claim to the inheritance was denied. It was a small victory, but it didn't erase the pain she caused. What really hit me hard was how she'd lied to everyone: her family, her friends, the lawyers. She'd spun such a convincing story that most people believed she was the victim. But I knew better. I saw her for what she really was: a liar, a manipulator, a user. She'd betrayed me, our home, and our future, and she'd done it with a bitchy smirk on her face. I felt like I'd been played for a fool for years, and now I was left picking up the pieces. I never thought I'd be the guy to get cheated on like this, but here I am, trying to rebuild from the wreckage she left behind. The hardest part is accepting that the woman I loved is gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. But I also realize I'm stronger than I thought. I've got the evidence, I've got the law on my side, and I've made the decision to move on. I'm not going to let her ruin me completely. I'm filing for full custody of our dog, trying to reclaim what's left of my life, and I'm starting therapy to deal with the emotional scars. It's not easy, and I know she'll keep trying to manipulate the situation, but I refuse to be her victim anymore. I've learned my lesson: trust is earned, not given, and never again will I overlook the signs of someone who's capable of this level of betrayal. The months that followed were some of the darkest, and yet somehow also the most clarifying of my life. After the court's ruling, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. She was legally out of my life, the house was gone, and I was finally free from her manipulations. But the emotional scars ran deep. I kept replaying everything: the lies, the betrayal, her smug attitude when she thought she'd gotten away with it all. It was like waking up from a nightmare, but the nightmare was real and it had changed me forever. I started focusing on rebuilding myself. The first thing I did was cut all contact with her. No responses to her texts, no calls, nothing. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I also filed for full custody of our dog, Max, who'd been my loyal companion through all this mess. I needed something to hold on to, and Max was it. The court granted me custody, which was a small victory, but it helped me feel like I was reclaiming some control over my life. Financially, I was devastated. She drained every last penny, and I was left with a mountain of debt, legal bills, and the emotional toll of betrayal. I started working with a financial advisor to get back on track. I sold off some assets, cut unnecessary expenses, and began to rebuild my savings from scratch. It was humbling, but it was necessary. I also found a therapist who specialized in betrayal and emotional recovery. Talking to someone helped me process the anger and sadness, and slowly I began to feel like I was regaining my strength. During this time, I also reached out to some friends and family, especially my brother and sister. They'd been supportive throughout, but I realized I needed to lean on them more. I told them everything: the lies, the sale of the house, the inheritance scam, the affair. Their support was invaluable. They reminded me that I wasn't at fault, that I had done everything right, and that I deserved better than someone who'd lie and cheat her way through life. As I started to move forward, I also became more cautious in trusting people. My whole perspective on relationships had shifted. I learned that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the person you trust the most is also capable of the worst betrayal. It's a hard lesson, but one I think everyone should learn at some point. I'm not bitter anymore, just more aware. I want to believe in love again someday, but I know now that trust has to be earned, and I won't make the mistake of ignoring red flags. Looking back, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned is about self-worth. I was willing to put up with a lot: her bitchy attitude, her lies, her manipulations, because I thought I owed her loyalty. But now I see that I only owed myself respect. No one should accept being cheated on, lied to, or used for someone else's gain. I've come to terms with the fact that some people are just fundamentally selfish, and the best thing you can do is walk away before they destroy everything you care about. Now, I'm slowly rebuilding my life, working hard and focusing on my future. I still have bad days, but I remind myself that I survived the worst. I've learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you who you really are: resilient, capable, and ready to start fresh. If you're reading this and going through something similar, my advice is: don't let it define you. Get out, get help, and don't settle for someone who doesn't value you. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's hard to repair. But your happiness and self-respect are worth fighting for. And someday, I believe, you'll find someone who genuinely deserves your trust and your love. Looking back now, I realize how much I've grown through this hellish experience. It's like I had to hit rock bottom to truly understand what I deserved and what I wouldn't tolerate anymore. The betrayal she pulled, selling our home, lying in court, manipulating her own sister, draining our savings, was a wake-up call I never expected. It shattered my trust in her and in the idea that I could ever really know someone completely. But it also forced me to confront my own strength, to stand up and fight for what's right, even when the odds seemed stacked against me. I've come to understand that sometimes the biggest act of self-love is walking away from someone who's toxic and destructive. I used to think that love meant forgiving, that if I just kept trying, things would get better. But I learned that love isn't about sacrificing your own peace and dignity for someone who doesn't appreciate it. The most important thing I've realized is that I am worthy of honesty, loyalty, and respect, things she took from me without a second thought. Now, I focus on the future. I work every day to rebuild my life piece by piece. I've started dating again cautiously because I know trust isn't given freely anymore, it's earned. I keep Max close, grateful for his unwavering loyalty, and I spend more time with my family, people who genuinely care and who remind me that I am not alone. The pain of betrayal will always be there, but it's no longer controlling me. It's just a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Most importantly, I want anyone reading this who's going through something similar to know this. You are stronger than you think. No matter how deep the betrayal, how cruel the lies, you can come out on the other side. It might take time, effort, and a lot of tears, but healing is possible. Don't let anyone make you feel small or unworthy because of their own selfishness. Your happiness, your integrity, and your self-respect are worth more than any lie or betrayal. I've learned that life is unpredictable, and sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But that pain can be a catalyst for growth. It can teach you who you are and what you truly value. I'm not perfect and I still have scars, but I'm done being a victim. I'm reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my hope for a better future. And if you're out there feeling broken, just remember, you're not alone and there's always a way forward. Sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest strength.